morning, everybody. Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning. Before we get going, I just want to share some good news with the entire team. You know, we've talked a lot about historic audience levels across both television and digital this year. Our best, most watched year ever in 2020. It's also our most honored year ever in 2020. The final portion of the news and documentary Emmys was held last night, and CNN had another terrific night. CNN and Espanol took home 3 Emmys last night for outstanding coverage of a breaking news story in Spanish for its coverage of the Barcelona riots, and 2 Emmys in the daytime category for Outstanding Morning Show in Spanish, Cafe CNN, and Outstanding Entertainment Program in Spanish, Destinos. In addition, CNN Digital won a News Emmy last night for Outstanding Feature Story in Spanish for its coverage of death and dignity on the U.S. border. As a result of all of this, it ends up being a record year for CNN, more Emmys in 2020 than any year ever, 16 total. 10 in the news and documentary category, 10 Emmy wins, which is both a CNN record and the most for any network this year, tied with PBS. PBS and CNN both had 10 news and documentary Emmy wins this year. Third place went to HBO with 7. There is no other cable news network or broadcast news outlet that's even close. So 10 in the news and documentary Emmy category, 3 in the daytime Emmy category, and 3 in the primetime Emmy category. 16 all told this year for a network record. Congratulations across the board to the entire team. A tremendous achievement. Okay, yesterday was the deadliest day for the pandemic. So let's start with COVID and Matthew, please.
Thanks, Jeff. So clearly we are now seeing the vaccine finish line come into focus. But as you say, at the same time, we're now seeing that awful trend everyone said was coming. Deaths becoming a bigger story. Yesterday saw 162,000 cases, 1,700 plus deaths, the highest since May. Daily deaths on average up 26% in just the last 2 weeks, averaging almost 1,200 a day, which is above the July peak. We are on pace to cross 250,000 lost Americans in the next day or two. It is a story of a patchwork of increasingly drastic but inconsistent restrictions in different cities and different states, and Fauci telling the Times the U.S. needs a uniform approach rather than this disjointed one. This, as the White House weekly task force report warns of aggressive, unrelenting, expanding community spread. No evidence of improvement, rather further deterioration. But the good news keeps on coming on vaccines. Pfizer this morning saying final analysis of its data shows 95% effectiveness, no safety issues. It will go to the FDA within days. And we now know the FDA has set that big vaccine decision meeting for December 8th to 10th. So we really have a strong sense of when that green light is coming. And the first big piece of good news on testing in a while. The FDA late last night authorizing a first at-home test that requires prescription, but you take it at home and you process it at home, results in 30 minutes. Looking around the CNN map, which we haven't highlighted in a few days because, it's up everywhere, but just highlighting that no state in the continental U.S. on the CNN map going in the right direction. In fact, 6 states reported their highest single day of deaths yesterday: Idaho, Iowa, Kentucky, New Mexico, North Dakota, and Wyoming. And again, it's this story of wildly differing restrictions. Michigan's big 3-week pause in effect as of today. High schools and colleges must be remote. Most jobs work at home. No indoor dining, no fitness classes, movies, and more through December 8th. We've got Sarah Detroit. Ohio announcing a 21-day statewide curfew. Oregon's 2-week freeze going into effect today, limiting social gatherings to no more than 6 people from 2 households. New restrictions in Washington for outside the home gatherings unless people quarantine. Then there's South Dakota, which we've talked about a lot, reported on a lot. South Dakota continues to resist statewide restrictions and mask mandates, and is now arguing that the data experts are overstating the state's positivity rate. But the cases there are now triple compared to September. Hospitalizations are way up. There's no arguing with that. Lucy Kavanaugh is in Sioux Falls, focusing today on Governor Noem's political resistance to safety measures. We will hear from Noem this afternoon, and just noting that at Lucy's location, Sioux Falls, South Dakota, did pass a city mask mandate for inside businesses and government offices last night. We've got Adrian Broadus in Chicago, Miguel Marquez in Cresco, Iowa, on the rural and hospital impact. On education and COVID, obviously next week is Thanksgiving, which is sort of a demarcation line for a lot of these school districts deciding whether kids come back after or not. Chicago announcing that it will be January for some students, February for others, until in-person learning returns. New York City schools remain open under that 3% mark, and a number of other districts asked to stop in person in Texas. Diana Goladriga on the education line. From health, the transition trouble remains. Top medical groups, doctors, nurses, hospitals, all calling on the Trump administration to share data with the Biden team to, quote, save countless lives. This increasing sense that the blocked transition really will delay the rollout of a vaccine and will hamper the ability to save lives. On a little more on the vaccines, William Hasseltine telling CNN early this morning he does expect FDA authorization of some kind to come very quickly for the first vaccines. And then there's the question of who's willing to take one. A new Gallup poll finding willingness to take a vaccine up a bit from 50 to 58%. Of course, that still means 4 in 10 Americans are hesitant. That could be a problem. New research this morning, a preprint study on this hotly debated issue of coronavirus immunity, that it can last more than 6 months. And then we have Sanjay Gupta, Elizabeth Cohen, and Jacqueline Howard available from the health team. Sarah Murray continues to report out the distribution questions as a GAO report warns of production bottlenecks ahead, a shortage of facilities, vials, syringes possible. Sports and COVID halfway through the week, already 8 college football games called off. And the COVID wrap pieces today are Alex Field for 3, 5, 7, and 9, Nick Watt for 4, 6, 8, and 10.
Okay. Thank you, Matthew. I just want to highlight Miguel Marquez's continuing coverage that you mentioned across the country, this time out of Iowa, continues to be superb, and the work he's done across the country. I just wanted to note that. I also want to highlight the fact that, we show charts all the time of number of cases and number of hospitalizations, but I do think we need to use the same charts for deaths to show the dramatic increase in that as well. Does anybody have any thoughts on COVID before we move on?
Hey, Dr. Cynthia, sorry, I couldn't unmute. I just wanted to mention we have a great story in Los Angeles. A young man, we have all the video also in English. He's 19 years old. His mother died. All of them were sick with COVID in L.A. His mother died, and he has now been left to care for his 4 young siblings. And the story is heartbreaking. And we have the interview with him, and it's just an incredible story. He's living in Los Angeles. He's from Los Angeles, and it's just an incredible story. We have all the interview and material, and I just think it's a great personal story to share with the audiences. So just wanted to point it out that we've got that story.
Okay, good. Thank you. Washington.
Okay, so the president this morning with 63 days left is locked in the White House. This will be day 11 since we haven't seen him. There are no public events to cause, chaos that are not working. We start with last night via Twitter firing Krebs for doing his job that he called the election the most secure in American history. His deputy also quit because he was not going to be elevated, and just, the revenge on that front. Then we have all these legal maneuvers that the bottom line is they're going nowhere fast, but they're dramatic in the moment. These moves last night that ultimately were Trump and the Republicans against the law. In Michigan, the certification of Wayne County results after Republicans stood in the way. There was an outcry from citizens claiming disenfranchisement. And then live, while Cuomo was on the air, the Republicans backed down. And we're watching the state canvass board meeting today. In Georgia, the deadline is today for the certification. All of that seems to be on course. There's also a 6 o'clock deadline in Wisconsin for a recount. Just to note that would cost $8 million if they ask for it. In Arizona at 5:15, there's a hearing about delaying certification. And then there's the Giuliani of it all. Just how skeptical a judge he faced last night reports this morning that he's being paid as much as $20,000 a day. And then Lindsey Graham was acknowledging last night that all of this went on in Georgia, Nevada, and Arizona. This ProPublica reporting overnight that the Georgia Secretary of State declined an offer to serve as an honorary chairman, co-chair of Trump in Georgia, and other efforts to get him involved in the campaign. On the transition, Kristen Holmes has new reporting out this morning about the head of GSA. It's really good reporting about how she is feeling the pressure to start the transition. She's not going to open the floodgates, but clearly, they're going to have to. She's feeling the pressure to start doing something. Crystal will be up with that later today. And then on the COVID of it all, there are reports this morning that Pence was told yesterday that it could be 2,000 deaths a day by Christmas. The task force itself warning of aggressive, unrelenting, expanding, broad community spread across the country, while the president continues to tweet or do absolutely nothing. On Capitol Hill, the 87-year-old Grassley tested positive as we see the war over masks in the rest of the country playing out on Capitol Hill. On the stimulus, there is still absolutely no movement, and this is going to become important as the distribution of the vaccine, because the question is whether there's going to be adequate funding to do that. And then just to note that the House Democrats are on track to fill the leadership elections this morning. Pelosi expected to win. She'll have a 12:30 presser, and just to note, she's going to preside over a very slim majority, complicating her life going forward. And I think that's it on COVID and legal.
Mm-hmm. Okay, before we move to David Challey in politics, I just want to say that I think all of our prime shows last night did a really good job, as well as digital, in covering a lot of breaking news last night. And I really thought New Day this morning was excellent in capturing just how outrageous what is going on, both from the firing of Krebs to what happened in Michigan to the behavior of the Republicans, which, all needs to continue to be called out. We cannot let up on this. It is outrageous behavior. It's anti-democratic, and it is our responsibility to hold their feet to the fire. David Challey with politics, and then we'll open it up.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, we're literally watching a sitting U.S. president try to steal an election, and I understand that the effort is totally unsuccessful, but that is what he's doing right now. Last night, just along these lines with the Krebs firing, we heard Cedric Richmond, who, as you know, is an incoming senior advisor to the Biden White House with a big role in the West Wing, on Don Lemon's on CNN Tonight last night, saying it's dangerous. Trump's whole behavior right now should frighten the American public. That's what the incoming senior advisor to the Biden administration was saying on our air last night. So they don't seem anymore to be in a position of trying to tamp down the concern because of just how totally insane it is what we're seeing, the behavior day in and day out. As for today, the president-elect is going to be holding a roundtable with frontline workers. This races around 1:30 p.m. I want to note that this is now the fourth day in a row, starting with Ron Klain on Meet the Press on Sunday, where the Biden transition is leaning into the biggest sort of alarm bell that they want to sound publicly day in and day out about the delayed transition is that it is going to prevent the management of COVID when they take over in January in the most efficient way possible. More so than what we're hearing on national security matters, more so than other areas of what the delayed transition impacts, which it impacts all areas, obviously. For the fourth day in a row now, the Biden team is publicly leaning into sounding the alarm on the delayed transition is going to make managing this massive health crisis that the country is facing, this raging pandemic, more difficult. This, as Jeff Zeleny reports this morning, that though we don't expect any cabinet announcements from Biden prior to Thanksgiving, one of the first cabinet announcements that we are likely to get out of the gate after the holiday is HHS, given where we are in the midst of this crisis, and that two Democratic governors are very high on the list of being considered for Health and Human Services Secretary Gina Raimondo of Rhode Island and Michelle Lujan Grisham of New Mexico. Obviously, governors who have been managing states through this pandemic. Also, as you know, Vivek Murthy is on that list as well. Though Zeleny reports that he may be considered for an inside the West Wing COVID role rather than HHS Secretary. But adding those two Democratic governors to the top of the list there for a key cabinet post, one that will likely be at the front end of cabinet announcements. And Jeff, because I know you like keeping a focus on the national popular vote, you see that Joe Biden's lead continues to grow as votes get counted. It's now more than 5.7 million advantage over Trump. We have not seen that kind of national popular vote advantage other than Obama's 2008 victory over McCain in the last 6 presidential elections. It is substantial now. Of course, that's not how we elect our presidents, though his electoral college victory is pretty substantial too. But I do think what the national popular vote shows you is just how much the Trump behavior is the president is acting against the will of the country, and the national popular vote probably makes that more clear than anything else as Biden's lead continues to grow there. In terms of the Georgia Senate runoff, a couple developments there today I want to note. One, elections officials begin sending out mail-in ballots in the Georgia Senate runoffs today for those voters who requested them. Of course, mail-in ballots start going out today, which have been the very center of all of these baseless claims, or a lot of them, that Donald Trump has been pursuing and his allies. It's clearly what was a topic of conversation between Lindsey Graham and the Secretary of State in Georgia. So we'll see what kind of stuff they want to throw against the wall now that mail-in ballots are going out in these runoff races, again, in the midst of a pandemic that is on the rise. Seems mail-in ballots is a safer way to conduct voting. We also had from David Wright this morning that the ad spending and reservations from now through the runoff are topping $125 million. And right now the Republicans have a pretty significant advantage in terms of ad spending and reserve time. The Democrats are just starting to place their bets, it seems, in Georgia, so we'll see them probably catch up. But at the moment, you do see a Republican advantage in ad spending in those Georgia races. And we also will hear from Raphael Warnock today calling out Kelly Loeffler on why she isn't standing up for the integrity of voting in Georgia. So trying to sort of flip the script on what the Republicans are trying to do with Raffensperger down there. Kyung La will have a look tonight at Stacey Abrams and other organizers who have been working in this space in Georgia in terms of the registering and organizing and turning out specifically of black voters for these runoffs. This was a critical component to the equation of turning Georgia red to blue on the presidential level, and so that activity is very much continuing and underway and renewed for these runoffs on the Democratic side, and Kyung is going to take a look at that for AC 360 tonight, and I think that is where we start the day, Jeff.
Okay, great. administration and the Trump administration, Donald Trump's despicable behavior. Anything anybody wants to bring up?
I know we've covered.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I know we've covered the diversity of the transition team, and obviously we just talked about Richmond, but of all of the senior White House staff and aides and counselors named yesterday, I think there were at least 4 people of color, including 3 Latinas, 2 women, and a man. So it's just like he's really, walking the walk in that regard. So like basically 4 of 9 of the senior aides announced yesterday are people of color.
Yep. Sam?
Jeff, on the vote count, 2 states, as they do the recount in Georgia, or the audit in Georgia, there hasn't been a single example of the Dominion voting machines coming up with a different number than the hand count. And I think that's important because that's the number one charge that the president has made. He continues to tweet about it. And there hasn't been a discrepancy in what the computer counted on Election Day and the day after and what the hand recount showed. So just that sort of takes all the remaining wind out of his argument about the machines. And second, we should watch Wisconsin closely because if they don't ask for a recount tonight at 6:00, by 6:00 with their $8 million, that speaks volumes, and it just reminds us that the president's words are only words, that there's no there there. So watch for that deadline.
Right. So I think that for tonight, the 2 key states, as you just outlined, Georgia and Wisconsin, could be put to rest tonight. So let's keep an eye on that. Other thoughts?
Jeff, I think that the Dominion story, I know we've done it, but the Dominion story is exactly where all the QAnon and all the crazies are focusing on. And that's where they keep going into, this is the Chavez and Latin America voting system, and it's set up with fraud from before you even start voting. I just don't know if we want to remind people that, that's where he keeps coming and harping on, and coming back to Sam's point, that it's been precisely disproven, and it's not, there is no fraud, and just hitting people over the head with it. I think that Sam's point is really important there on Dominion.
Okay. Other thoughts? Anybody else?
Hey, Jeff. I don't know if somebody already mentioned this, but Digital has a really good piece on Emily Murphy and her struggle, and I think it would be a good TV story if we haven't done it.
Doing it. Chris was doing it for 9, I think. But
yeah, she was just up with it.
Yeah.
She was just up with it.
Okay. All right. I think we should continue to do that because the pressure on this woman is intense on both sides, and she's a lawyer, and so she's supposed to be considering things very carefully, a bureaucrat, all those kinds of things. But we've seen it just sort of as a very political thing. But I think there's more to it than that. But obviously, she's getting close to having to make a real decision on this and move it forward as she should. And I just think that that's a good focus for us.
Okay.
And I would recommend that we reuse Rick Bright's soundbite from the morning show because he pointed out how damaging this is, delaying the ability for the new administration to get a handle on the vaccine rollout. So important and so damaging that they're preventing that.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, is there anything else in Washington?
Just after the 20-month grounding, the FAA approved the Boeing 737 MAX to fly again. Unclear when that'll actually happen given COVID, but just to note that.
Okay. Anything else in domestic?
Just one thing of note, this series of murders in the Colorado Springs area, a bunch of agencies investigating, they're not calling it a serial killer case, but it seems to be heading in that direction. A bunch of missing people, a noon press conference. We'll see what comes from
International.
Hey, good morning. So I just want to start with Nima's great reporting today. She has an exclusive investigation on a government crackdown in Nigeria that got global attention when protests over a controversial police squad turned violent. She and her team have uncovered through video, eyewitness accounts, etc., that the Nigerian army actually fired live bullets at these peaceful protesters, despite what the government says. So it's really strong reporting out today. We're going to play it a lot, and we are seeking official government reaction, but I just wanted to highlight that off the top, and I'm sure Digital will have more to say about it. So just on COVID news, Fred Pleitgen today at 10 a.m. has an exclusive interview with the BioNTech CEO. This is on the vaccine in partnership with Pfizer. Some new details out today, like it's 95% effective, positive data, particularly with regard to seniors, and that they'll apply for FDA emergency use authorization within days. So that's all great stuff from Fred. He also has a report from Lufthansa shipping operations. The airplane is going to play a really big role in the transport of the vaccine, so he shows us a window into those logistics of rolling this out. And then just last with Fred, there's also big demos against restrictions in Berlin this morning that are worth noting. France is the first country in Europe to reach 2 million cases. Melissa Bell has that line. Big picture in Europe, they've seen a 10% decline in cases for the first time in 3 months, but deaths continuing to increase. That's from The Who. Ivan Watson gives us a status update on China's experimental vaccines. The top line from him is that none of the Chinese vaccines have passed phase 3 clinical trials, but they're already out. They've been administered to frontline workers in China, the UAE, and Bahrain. Tokyo hits the highest number of cases ever. Meanwhile, Olympic officials had a press conference this morning on their latest. They said they won't reduce the number of athletes coming to the games. So Selena Wang has those lines. And then just the non-COVID news, Sam Kiley is up on what Trump's drawdown of troops in Afghanistan and Iraq means for them. Warren Lieberman can be live on Pompeo and his events in Israel. And then just on the story that Virginia mentioned on Boeing, Quest is in today doing her show, so he can talk about that with shows who are interested in the 737 MAX getting back in the air. So that's where we start.
Thanks very much. Business.
Good morning, Jeff. Stock futures are bouncing again after the latest positive news on the vaccine front. And with Pfizer's 95% effectiveness rate now matching Moderna's, there's hope for traders who are looking for a real rebound in the second half of the year. However, that optimism is tempered by bad signs in the real economy today. Walmart is once again warning that shoppers are loading up on paper goods and cleaning supplies in areas of the country that are being ravaged by coronavirus cases. The company is warning that even 8 months into the pandemic, supply chains are not keeping up with rising demand, leading to empty shelves in locations with sharp spikes in new cases. So despite the panic buying, which is a boon for large retailers like Target and Walmart, both of which had strong earnings today, retail spending growth across the economy slowed overall in October. And the new data raises big concerns about a difficult winter with lower consumer spending during the all-important holiday shopping season. And as both Penny and Virginia mentioned, on the 737 MAX, it's important to note that this plane was the best-selling jet in Boeing's fleet before it was grounded more than 20 months ago. And so the process of approving the plane also took more than a year longer than originally expected. So just the headline on this one for us is that this is now considered the most expensive corporate blunder in American history with the 737 MAX as it returns to the skies. Pete Muntean is available on Boeing, Alison Cossack and Julia Satterley on markets, and Christina Alessi is on the consumer shortage.
Okay. So before we move to digital, does anybody have anything else they want to bring up?
Jeff, I just wanted to bring up Central America, which is a complete and utter human disaster. It has been completely devastated with IATA after the passing of Etta a couple of weeks ago. It is thousands and thousands and thousands of people. There will be repercussions because those people have nowhere to go, and they ultimately try to reach the U.S. when these kinds of crises happen. And it's a human disaster. It's an economic disaster. And I just think that, there's a huge drive, especially in Los Angeles, to help these people because there's a huge Central American community population that's asking for donations. The same thing's happening in Miami. There's about 4 million people in the U.S. of Central American descent, and I just think that that's a huge story for us.
Okay. Okay, digital.
Good morning, Jeff. We had 35 million yesterday. The top 10 stories were all politics and our coronavirus. The Collinson-Trump transition piece was number one for us yesterday. The Michigan-Detroit certification story, even though it was late in the day, was also in our top stories. The Ted Cruz calling a Senate colleague an ass was a top story. Right now, engagement-wise, we're seeing more than 2 minutes on our story from the weekend, looking at Ivanka and Jared and what they will return to in New York. And also, really importantly, our Nigeria distinctive investigative piece, which we're all super proud of and thankful for. Video-wise, this morning, our top videos on mobile web is How Dare You, the bipartisan Zoom call that over outraged Republicans' moves on the certification front and how they changed, they got them to switch. And that's a piece from Don's show last night. On the app, it's Watch the Mask Fight Erupt on the Senate floor. And then on desktop, it is DHS official Chris Krebs, former official, tweeting about being fired. So it's, audiences are with us on those important stories. Right now, our top story is the Collinson story that's leading the sites, and it's over 21,500 right now. And then the second story continues to be that Michigan certification story. So audiences are keen in on its importance. Of course, going forward today, we'll continue with politics and the Trump effort to deny or reverse the truth. We have a great piece up right now from Saliza on Lindsey Graham trying to be the enabler in chief and what that's about. And we'll keep holding the Republican feet to the fire over this. We have the great profile that Michael actually did a head nod to on Emily Murphy, the transition official who is refusing the transition. And of course, we'll sail all over COVID. And we have obviously the vax story up. We have the death story up. We'll have a visual interactive coming on what 250,000 deaths mean and what it compares to in our lives otherwise. We have a really smart opinion piece on the greatest generation versus the COVID generation, and put that into perspective. And of course, in other news, we're covering the Boeing 737 MAX story, and as we've mentioned more than once this morning, we are super proud of the investigative piece from Nima and a massive cast looking at this extraordinary killing of peaceful protesters in Nigeria, Africa's largest country, most populated country, and a big audience for CNN. And it's kind of journalism that makes a difference, and not many news outlets can pull off like we can at CNN. So we're super proud of it. It's a great digital presentation. Everyone should check it out on their phone or on their laptop, because it kind of has all the bells and whistles that really draws audiences in and makes the story real for them around the world. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Marcus. John?
Good morning, Jeff. So right now, all these different vote count and transition mess threads are leading the shows. Kristen Holmes on what's going on in Michigan. We're waiting to see what happens at 1:30 this afternoon when the Michigan canvas, the state board meets after that craziness in Wayne County last night. And also she is going to land on her GSA reporting and Murphy under fire and the decision that she needs to make involving the transition. Amara Walker here in Georgia, where we are bumping into these transition and certification deadlines, rather. Georgia in a couple of days, the Wisconsin recount deadline tonight at 6. Key moments that we'll certainly focus on. Alex Marquardt on the Krebs firing, Caitlin Collins on Trump's bunker mentality not going to Mar-a-Lago, and then Jessica Dean this morning, Arlette Science this afternoon on Biden keeping a sharp focus on the transition, keeps naming staffers, and meeting with these frontline workers this afternoon. We'll certainly show those pictures. We have Trinita Tolson, Rick Hassan, Steve Vladeck, and former FEC official Adam Matty to really land on this democracy under assault theme that we're seeing with all these moves in all these different states. Next hour, Jim Sciutto interviews the attorney who's repping a number of the Pennsylvania counties that are being sued by Trump with these very frivolous and paper-thin lawsuits and claims. Breon is going after one of the Nevada electors, Democratic electors, who's also being sued by the Trump campaign, very outspoken on Twitter against their moves. And Brooke has one of Krebs' close friends, Alex Stamos, former
number of deaths, hospitalizations. The crisis keeps getting worse. As we're getting two big developments that actually offer some promise, the Pfizer vaccine news, FDA next steps, as well as the at-home tests. Fred Pleitgen, as Penny mentioned, has a BioNTech CEO interview. That's a good companion piece with our Pfizer reporting. We'll kick that out later this morning once we get that in-house. We have the head of the American Immunization Association on all the distribution challenges that we're facing, plus Tom Inglesby from Johns Hopkins and Leanna Nguyen and Celine Gounder from the advisory, the task force, Biden's task force on all the coronavirus headlines. We'll get to Sarah Seidner in Michigan on the restrictions being put in place today. We do have Miguel Marquez in Iowa with his really strong reporting. Adrian Broadus on Chicago warning its residents, please don't have Thanksgiving. And Lucy Kavanaugh with her Christy Nome piece that is airing today. We have a University of Utah pulmonary specialist, as well as a head of one of the North Dakota's hospital systems. They're setting up a separate COVID ward outside the hospital because there's just no more room inside the hospital. And finally, Governor Ned Lamont with John King. He is under quarantine in Connecticut because of one of his staffers has COVID and he was exposed to them.
Great. Thank you, John. Washington?
Morning. At 4 o'clock, Caitlin from the White House with all the transition, obstruction, fire ranks, legal efforts. And we've got Senator Mark Warner as well, so we can talk Krebs, GSA, and telebriefings, and so on. Zeleny is on Biden, his roundtable on COVID today, and we have the Georgia Secretary of State Raffensperger joining Jake as we stay on all angles of that story. Nick Watt has our COVID wrap as the death count hits new highs, and Sanjay, of course, and we'll try to get in some international headlines as well.
And in the Situation Room, we'll obviously be staying on COVID. Yesterday, the deadliest day ever, no state going in the right direction, and we'll follow on all the specific developments in each of the worst-hit states, see what Governor Nome has to say this afternoon when she speaks. And obviously the strong vaccine news with Pfizer nearing emergency use authorization. So we'll follow all of that with the doctors. We have our Nick Watt and Alex Field wrap pieces. We also have the mayor of Chicago booked and New Jersey Governor Murphy. All of this as Trump is ranting behind closed doors, the administration refusing to share information with the transition, putting more lives at risk. We'll follow on last night's desperate firings. We have Adam Schiff joining us today. And then obviously these pathetic legal maneuvers. What happened with Michigan last night. We'll be paying close attention to what happens in Georgia today with the deadline for certification. And then the Wisconsin deadline falling during our show at 6 p.m. So we'll keep an eye on that. We'll be also watching the Biden Roundtable at 1:30 with frontline workers. And then we have the Nima El-Bagher exclusive piece on Nigeria that's been mentioned.
Which is a terrific piece of reporting. Okay, does anybody else have anything they want to bring up?
Hey, Jeff, it's Tim. I just want to emphasize something you brought up at the beginning of this meeting about COVID deaths. I think we all know someone who might be a COVID denier in our lives, and one of the things they point to is, the rate of cases are going up, the rate of number of people who are sick are going up, but the deaths are remaining kind of constant. As Matthew pointed out earlier in this meeting, that's no longer the case. I don't think we can overemphasize that. I really don't. I think we need to shout it out. And I also think that it would be very helpful for us, very helpful to show our viewers the portrait of a dead American from COVID. How old are they? What is their race and ethnicity? What is their demographic information? What is their finances? That type of thing. I think also that would bring it home.
Other thoughts?
Jeff, I have one thought on what happened yesterday in Michigan, given the interest in that story. We talk a lot about the president and what he's doing or what the Republicans in Congress are doing to enable him. But last night, the Zoom meeting when the Wayne County Board tried to do what they did, the sound from that is incredible, and some of it is in the system for shows or digital. Person after person, local official, voter, they were outraged, and they spoke up and said, "You are stealing my vote. This is not democracy. You should be ashamed of yourselves." they fought for hours, and the board changed its mind. And I think it just shows what the people out there who stood in line, who voted, who did everything they did, what they are still having to do to fight for their votes to count. And I think it's really important that we reflect that too.
Okay, good. I agree. Thank you, Maria. Anybody else? Okay. So again, there's a ton going on. Let's make sure we're focused on COVID and the increasing unfortunate death rate. Don't hide from that.